Hello, I'm Charles Kovess, Australasia's passion provocateur. Welcome to this week's episode of the Charles Kovess Show. Whether you're watching on Rumble or on YouTube or listening via one of the many podcasting platforms, this is the place for you to be inspired to live a life of passion that is guided by your self-awareness about who you are and what you want your life to be. Passion is a source of unlimited energy from your soul, your spirit, your heart that enables you to produce extraordinary results, extraordinary results. Why extraordinary? Because most people aren't passionate. When you are passionate, you are above ordinary. Remember, greatness can only be achieved through your passion. So let's get into this week's key issues I want to share with you. On the 25th of April in Australia, we celebrated Anzac Day. And Anzac Day commemorates a World War I episode that occurred on the 25th of April in 1915. It is a solemn, important occasion for the nation. It's a public holiday. I have done shows on Anzac Day, but the thing I want to highlight to you is that Australia has gone to war in every case in a fight for freedom, in a fight for maintaining its own national sovereignty. These are freedom fights. The whole issue of going to war, a nation goes to war. Why? To protect itself, to protect its citizens, to protect the rights and the freedoms of those citizens. So it is important, and freedom, as you all know, is one of the things that I would give my life to. There's been a lot of controversy all week about the Aboriginal desire to run welcome to country. Now, this welcome to country, in my view, is nonsense. I don't need a welcome to country. I was born here, and I reject the whole welcome to country game. It was invented almost as a joke by an Australian actor. I'm not going to mention his name. 1976. It's a new idea. And the game that's being played is that the Aboriginals want to say this is our land and we are, anyone who's not Aboriginal is just an occupier. Sorry, he's just a guest of the Aborigines. I reject that model, just so that you're very clear about it. The second big issue in the news is the Snowy Mountains Hydroelectric Scheme 2.0. And what I want to highlight about this is that the budget for this from Malcolm Turnbull, former Prime Minister, this idea, this brain fart, was a $2 billion scheme to create a battery, in effect, pump water up the hill and then let it down to generate electricity, literally a natural type of battery. Well, the budget was $2 billion. And this week it was announced that it's actually going to cost a minimum of $42 billion to complete to complete the setup, let alone all the transmission wires required. $2 billion to $42 billion. How about that? That's some increase. And Turnbull the Prime Minister came out with this idea in about 2016, so 10 years ago, and they're shameless in saying, it's just going to cost $42 billion. It is just disgraceful. The third disgrace is the NDIS, the National Disability Insurance Scheme. It's being rorted, criminally cheated on, like the Minnesota child care facilities. It's now becoming apparent that there are all sorts of fraudsters accessing this NDIS government money. So here we have three examples of state and federal governments behaving badly. In this case, I'm going to show you some more, but in this case, these issues, NDIS, Anzac Day, and the hydro scheme are federal decisions, but I'm going to give you some examples of state government decisions. We must learn to hold politicians to account. If we keep putting up with crap, we will get more crap. So this is the reminder to you to not sit down and say, I can't do anything about it. Each one of us who complains about this has an impact. Trust me, it makes a difference. Now, the main topic this week is on home ownership and the fact that a nation's culture is hugely impacted by the level of home ownership. There's a disaster on the way in Australia and other Western nations where young adults are not able to buy their homes. They can only rent. They can't afford to buy homes. And I say this is another huge failure by our political class, by our bureaucratic class. It is gross incompetence, and if it's deliberate, it is corrupt. And you start to go, well, why would it be deliberate? Because there are people benefiting from decisions made by politicians. There's a wonderful Latin phrase that says cui bono, Q-U-I-B-O-N-O. Who benefits? So who is benefiting from the problem of far too expensive first homes for young adults? Think about that. What I'm going to go through is the philosophy around why culture is very much impacted by levels of home ownership. And then I'm going to give you two very practical examples of two thinkers, both happen to be friends of mine, on solutions to this problem of expensive housing. Remember, someone is benefiting from houses being incredibly expensive, or someone's being incredibly incompetent in terms of the number of immigrants that are coming into Australia and other countries, because it's the demand for housing that pushes the price up, the cost of it up, if you don't increase supply. If you've got a massive number of new immigrants and not enough housing, the price of houses goes up. Politicians, governments are supposed to balance this supply and demand so that houses are affordable. So, let me share some quotes with you. So, Zachary Taylor, the 12th President of the United States, said this: "The man who owns the soil, who houses and feeds his family from his own property, is the cornerstone of a nation's independence." Another one, Fulton J. Sheen, an American Catholic archbishop and philosopher. He said this: "The widespread distribution of private property ownership is the cornerstone of American liberty," and I say Australian liberty and any nation's liberty. "Without it, neither our free enterprise system nor our republican form of government could long endure." G.K. Chesterton, an English writer and philosopher from the early 20th century, quote, "The man who owns his own house cannot be a communist. He has too much to do." That's an interesting idea, isn't it? If you own your own home, you have too much to do to be a communist. And right now, you're seeing in America and in Australia the push towards the left, towards communism, towards Marxism, towards socialism. And Zoran Mamdani, and in fact, in America, the Democrat nominee for the midterm elections in November, in Maine, is an avowed communist. And people are having this idea that communism is a great idea. Well, this is where culture comes in, because if you can't afford to buy a house, you start to create mega mischief. And another quote by G.K. Chesterton: "Unless the great majority of men in a country own their home, the ground it stands on, and their means of livelihood, the citizens of that country cannot be free." And I want you to think about these quotes. I've been thinking long and hard about these quotes because they also apply to the family farm, which is one of the reasons why I am so passionate and committed about the expansion of industrial hemp in Australia and globally. Ownership of successful family farms is a crucial defence against government overreach. And then the culture in terms of towns and cities of owning your own home means that you have skin in the game of how a nation is governed. If a nation is a land of renters, then easy come, easy go. There's no investment in the nation. People who own their homes have a stake in stability and in the rule of law. And the rule of law is the respect for the law. I've done shows on that previously, that if people respect the law, then a society functions. If people do not respect the operation of law, and that can happen when judges are biased and corrupt, then what happens is that society slowly breaks down. And there are many, many examples in Western countries where judges are, in fact, being corrupted by the political class. The Westminster system requires this separation between judges and politicians. It's a real problem, particularly in the health space now, where Australian courts, American courts, UK courts are following the government line on health policy rather than on the proper preservation of the freedom of its people. So coming back to the philosophy of why high levels of home ownership make a big impact on a nation's culture, I've now explained that. And then secondly, it makes sense if young people can't afford to buy their own homes, then they go, this system sucks. This system is a bad system, they say. Therefore, let's destroy the system. And that's what's happening with the leftist movements, where people are going, this system that we've got in many Western countries should be dismantled. The only problem is they haven't got a better system to replace it. And I say that communism, Marxism, socialism has never worked. It won't work. And what it does is to put the ruling class in charge. I think that's a shitty idea. So that's the first part. Why have high levels of ownership? The second then is, okay, the newspapers are full of this problem in right around the world. Homes are too expensive. What to do about it? And I'll focus on Australia, and I'll focus on two sets of policies, two very credible sets of policies by two friends of mine, Kevin Lockray and Gerard Clark. We call him Jerry. Now, these two guys have done some good thinking about, well, what do we do about this? How do we make houses more affordable? Well, let me tell you what Kevin Lockray, Lougrey, his website is in the show notes, kevinlockray.com.au. And he has on his website a housing solution. And the goal is to deliver a simple, modest 3-bedroom home on 800 square metre block for less than 300,000 Australian dollars, 200,000 US dollars to first home buyer families. And the system is based on the highly successful Defence Service Homes scheme. And Kevin comes from a military background. Now, Kevin on his website says, broad-based home ownership is key to raising families, wealth formation, retirement security, civic participation, and intergenerational stability. He says, at present, home ownership is generally unaffordable for young families. This scheme that he's promoting, I'm going to mention a little bit about, addresses the root causes, which are restricted land supply. So Australia's got huge amounts of land, but that is restricted for building homes, excessive regulatory costs, huge immigration, and foreign ownership of residential property. And indeed, in Victoria, there are many, particularly Chinese overseas buyers who have bought residences that are unoccupied. Now, Kevin's scheme, as I said, is to copy the highly successful Defence Service Home scheme, delivered through a new public land supply authority working in partnership with willing states and councils. Of course, this question of willing states and councils, that's the state governments and then local government authority. You've got to find that first, because there seems to be a hidden agenda to not implement these sensible solutions. Kevin's scheme will provide cost-priced service blocks, low-interest government mortgages at the Commonwealth government bond rate, and strict but fair covenants to ensure genuine home ownership rather than speculators. Now, my second plan, or a slight variation on this from Jerry Clark, his two elements are good design. Number one, in terms of making land efficient and effective to be able to have affordable housing. And then secondly, the rules that state governments and local government authorities impose. So let me read to you what he says. So on the issue of design, Jerry found an old powerhouse or substation, they were called, a significant block of land. And what would often happen is that this block of land gets sold to a developer for 4 high-rise buildings with $1 million apartments. And what Jerry has designed, and is very clever in his design, is to separate this chunk of land into separate titles to make the land available for $20,000 for each parcel of land, not $300,000. And then first homeowners can build their own homes for in the realms of $70,000 to $100,000. And it really enables the start of getting onto the ladder of home ownership. And then as new first home buyers come, the people who have built and own this and looked after them then make a reasonable profit when they sell, and they can buy the next home. That's how I did it. Start with a small home, build up to a big home. And the question of huge debt of mortgages becomes then a burden on families. On top of that is the problem of superannuation. Now, at the moment in Australia, the superannuation contribution on salaries is 12%. So people have suddenly lost, and suddenly the package of wages to people includes that superannuation. So that if you're getting a $100,000 package, it means 12% of that $100,000 is going into superannuation. You can't spend it when you are young. The argument is, yes, but it'll look after you in your retirement. Well, I point out to you that in most national retirement schemes, a vast amount of administrative cost goes to the financial sector. So there are people, and in Australia it's considered that some 20 to 25% of all the money that's gone into compulsory superannuation in this country has been spent on administration, on commissions to the people who are managing this money. Coming back to Jerry Clark, so he says good design with an aim to providing first home buyers with affordable houses. And his second comment is that all blocks of land in country towns should get road and services provided by local councils and be available to residents just as the forefathers of those towns expected a century ago. And that's how it happened. The local councils built the roads, provided the services. And right now, if there's a road to be built, the council charges the residents. That's number one. Number two, the zoning rules imposed by local councils stops people from subdividing farming blocks into houses. And these councils say, we're keeping this rural aspect of it, but then people can't, because there's no subdivision allowed, then these rural blocks, these farming blocks, are too small to be profitable, unless, of course, they're using industrial hemp. But secondly, the safety rules, all of the extra costs that are put onto buildings these days means that the builders cannot build homes that are affordable by first home buyers. So again, It's the decisions of local governments, of state governments, of federal governments, driven by a desire to solve this problem. And coming back to this challenge that I put on these governments and therefore onto you, well, don't you think we need to do something about solving this issue and holding our governments to account by speaking up about it? I'm concerned about Australia's culture. I'm concerned about a low home ownership culture. I seriously and passionately want the ability of people, of young people, to own their homes, because that is going to ensure a freedom, a level of freedom, a level of liberty in each nation. Please think about this issue. Please converse with your friends about it. Send me your thoughts. You might have a fantastic policy idea that I will happily promote through my show. My last thing I want to raise with you is 2 health tips. I heard this a long time ago from a friend of mine who's died, Jim Steins, famous Australian rules footballer, and he got me onto this product, and I'd forgotten about it, and I've gone back onto it in the last 3 months, and I found it to be excellent. It's coenzyme Q10. It's a supplement. I'm finding it is giving me great energy benefits. Coenzyme Q10. Look it up. I had forgotten, you know how we sometimes get suggestions, we start doing stuff and then we forget? I forgot. That's number 1 tip. Number 2 tip. I'm still staggered with all the times I've talked about vitamin C, how few people understand the benefits of vitamin C. The daily recommended allowance of vitamin C by the medical fraternity is 70 milligrams. 70 milligrams. Right, and there's 1,000 milligrams in a gram. I take every day 7,000 milligrams. I take 100 times the official recommended daily allowance. I urge you to keep pumping vitamin C. Our bodies are under all sorts of attacks on their functioning, including electromagnetic radiation, including all the poisons that we ingest from food that's not particularly clean. Your body needs vitamin C to help in its immune response, in its elimination system. Get onto vitamin C. Try coenzyme Q10. So, that's it. I hope today's show makes a beneficial difference to your life. A life that I believe is meant to be all that you are capable of making of it. If you're new to the show, check the links to read about the foundational principles of the show, my background, and go and visit my website, charleskovess.com, where you can find my books, my passion programs, my corporate team building and leadership programs, and many free and useful resources. Please subscribe to the show and share it with your friends, colleagues, family. It won't cost you anything except the risk of greater passion, greater awareness, and a greater enjoyment of your life. Again, thanks for watching or listening. And until our next show, may your week be full of passion, learning, fun, fulfillment, and ever-increasing self-awareness, so you know how to live life on your terms. See you next time. Bye.